Imagine that you're trying to choose between two different schools to send your child to. One school requires uniforms, and the other school does not require uniforms. Do you know which school you would choose? Schools should not require students to wear uniforms because they force students into social castes, interfere with our patriotic rights, have no effect on controlling violence and improving performance, and delay the transition into adulthood. Students have an instinct to find some way to separate themselves. According to the procon.org site for school uniforms, students will find some other way to separate themselves by. For example, students who don't have this cool new phone or that new laptop. Lower income families will not be able to afford as many uniforms, so the wear in their clothing will be more obvious to their peers. This causes students to separate into classes. Procon.org also states that proponents for school uniforms claim that children are still able to express their feelings in words. But how many times have you seen a child go to detention for speaking out against something? Schools do not have free speech. If a school enforces uniforms, they are taking away all individuality. Seattle PI also feels that school uniforms encourage all children to be the same and not have different opinions or thoughts. School uniforms also prevent the opportunity to show support for different causes. According to procon.org, 75 students at Friendly High School in Prince George's County in Maryland received in-school suspension for wearing pink to support breast cancer awareness in October of 2013. Students cannot be participating in learning when they're stuck in school suspension. How is that helpful to the students improving academic achievement? Tom Houlihan, former superintendent of schools in Oxford, North Carolina, even agreed that school uniforms are, quote, a distraction from focusing on systematic and fundamental transformation to improve our schools. The focus should be on teaching better and helping students understand things, not handing out detentions for not wearing the proper clothing. Here in America, we have a right to free education. Children can go to any public school for free, well, paid for by our tax dollars. When a public school requires students to wear uniforms, free education is no longer free. Procon.org explains that parents still have to buy clothing for the child when school is not going on, like Saturdays, Sundays. So it doesn't really save the parents money because they're buying both sets of clothing anyways. Procon.org also said that some children in York County, Pennsylvania were missing class in September of 2014 simply because their parents could not afford to buy the uniforms. How is that good for students' education when they can't even afford to wear the proper clothing to go to school? Procon.org also makes the argument that the government should not be able to control what our children wear. Parents should be in charge of children, not the government, and the government has been trying to take little parts of that away from us parents. Studies have shown that violence has increased with changes in school uniform policy. According to Procon.org, there is one often quoted study that showed uniforms decreasing violence, but there were other changes in security measures that could have contributed to the decrease in violence. Dr. Alan Hilfer, a child psychologist, confirms that when schools show a decrease in violence, those schools are also focusing on teaching awareness about violence and bullying. According to the Seattle PI education site, school uniforms may decrease gang violence, but there are often strains between students of two different schools because they wear different clothing. They also say that school uniforms cause an increased burden on administrators and disciplinarians because they are focusing on enforcing school uniforms when they should be focusing on more important things. In 1999, Texas Southern University did a study which found a 12% increase in incidents requiring discipline once uniforms were introduced. David Brunsma, professor of sociology at Virginia Tech, found in a national study of 10th graders that there was no effect on school attendance, violence, substance use, school pride, academic preparedness, or attitudes about school. He actually found a negative effect on academic achievement. They also found that it didn't matter if a kid was in high school, middle school, or elementary school, the results were the same. Lastly, school uniforms slow down a child's transition into adulthood. Developmental psychologist Erik Erikson said that adolescents seek clothing as a means of identification. And seeking identification is one of the most important parts of adolescent growth. Procon.org also explains that adults choose their own clothing and can show their individuality. But if a child wears a school uniform every day, they don't have as much practice choosing their own clothing. There are many things in society that we are not allowing children to do, and it's setting them back on the growth process into adulthood. Would you want to help your child make clothing decisions up until they're 20 plus years old and possibly raising children of their own? I don't. I would like them to be more independent so that I can move on with my empty nester life. Obviously, mandatory uniforms are not in the best interest of anyone, not the students, parents, principal, or disciplinarian. The best option is to keep children educated about how violence and bullying affects others. Give them motivation through love and teaching, and you will see that violence will go down and academic achievements will go up. If each of you just stood against school uniforms when the topic comes up in a PTA meeting or in any other parent-involving meeting, we would show the world that school uniforms are not in the best interest of anyone.